why we use Miro?
Well, when I draw on a whiteboard, nobody sees it.
But with Miro, we
Plan
plan
together
hear me?
in real time
I
from
can hear you.
literally everywhere.
Oh, it's not just a board. It's like this infinite canvas where we can visualize ideas,
Review designs,
create mind maps,
flowcharts,
you name it.
all in one place.
And video meetings take half the time when you can actually show what it is that you're talking about. Okay, let's be real. Working remotely before was
You're listening to the ZNN Newscast on the ZNN News Network with your hosts, Dave, and Xavier Diamant. Proceed by inquiry.
All right, welcome to episode 39 of the ZNN Newscast. We're your hosts, Dave, and Xavier Diamant. It's December 8th, 2022, as we head into the end of the year, and this might be our last episode of the year. We'll see. It's been plenty to talk about, more than we've been able to fit into any of our shows, which if you're a listener, anywhere from 2.5, 3, 4 hours sometimes we'll sit and go over specific subjects or just wide range freeform discussion about current events. Typically we integrate sort of like a word of the day, and we don't have one for today's show to sort of set the theme, but we do hope to have a very special guest. If you saw the thumbnail, we are supposed to be joined by a fellow, what I'll call a ZNN content creator. His handle is The Improbable Dreamer, the Doctor. It was a little too long for the description there, but just came across him for myself. I think you've been listening a little bit longer, but just the last couple of weeks I've been delving into his content, which fires on many of the same cylinders that we do, at least around the official historical narrative that we have been given about our origins, old world construction, and really the Earth's past.
The telos of civilization and the trajectory by which we've evolved, and that we're at the cusp of the greatest everything that we've always been right now.
Yeah. And actually we don't have a word of the day, but I did want to mention, just to sort of kick off the discussion, the Oxford word of the year for 2022 is goblin mode.
Is that 2 words?
Yeah, it's not very grammatically
It's like a
correct.
phrase,
Right?
I
It's a
guess.
slang term.
Yeah.
But it refers to, some new social norms that have come about, post-cerveza virus, where you're just unapologetically self-indulgent, lazy, slovenly, and greedy, sitting cooped up in your room, just looking at, scrolling through social media, ordering pizza, just being like a little goblin. And it does, I thought it was apropos because we're going to be talking about, old world construction and how we've really seen more of a devolution
Right.
than an evolution. And I thought goblin mode spoke to that because certainly we've seen a lot more goblins in the last 3 years come to the surface, so to speak. And that's actually apropos as well, come to the surface, because we'll be talking about subterranean civilizations and installations and things of that nature. Hopefully with Improbable Dreamer. Improbable Dreamer, if you are out there listening, you can dial in, as anybody listening can, to the call-in line, which is 1-855-877-5112. And I'll see you in my queue, and we can drop you in at any point in the conversation. If for some reason there was a conflict, we're going to talk about these subjects anyways,
Right.
and play some of his material, and really get into that.
Definitely.
So I don't really have any housekeeping or any other topics, really. I just wanted to sort of introduce the doctor. You can check him out. Look him up, The Improbable Dreamer, the doctor, on YouTube. He's got an Instagram with over 100,000 followers. He's got I think his biggest channel is TikTok, where he has even more than that. Let's just play a quick clip to give people a sense of the type of content that he's putting out, and that it seems like people are becoming increasingly interested about. So hopefully you guys can hear this.
Baby incubators, these weird exhibits where people would pay to gawk at infant babies in incubators. That's right, you would pay to look at live infants in incubators. And apparently it was quite the show and drew quite the crowd. But he was all doing it just to, fund his research. The man with no prior medical experience. And all this happening at the same time as the unusually large child labor force, prior to any of the wars, mind you. And of course, the same time as these massive orphan asylums popping up all over the country. At the same time we have these going on. These Cabbage Patch Kids, the true Cabbage Patch Kids, with this very creepy film. And of course, you also had the orphan trains. And yet, just another strange layer to this time, the mailing of children. Apparently, this was such a thing up until 1915, when they decided it wasn't such a good idea. But they would mail these children. If you didn't get it from the orphan trains or the Cabbage Patch or the infant asylums. So you have the baby.
So that's one. So just looking at some of these stories that were given that are very much glossed over.
Oh, entirely not mentioned in the vast preponderance of even higher level history, doctorate courses and stuff like this. You look at these time periods in question, it's just this highly myopic, sort of specialist topic driven version of history. Like, it doesn't give you a big picture of all of the just wild things that were happening. And most people, you're right, are just completely unaware of the breadth of this just literal Wild West.
Yeah.
That is wilder than any portrait we've been given through the media.
Yeah. Here's another one. And this is where another
Here we
topic.
have a video from the mine explorer in France, where he goes down into a mine with a lot of architecture that would seem to be on the surface, probably at the time of when this little city was around. There's even a car from the early 1900s and just endless tunnels with stonework. It's definitely an interesting thing to look at and incredible to say the least. What do you think? Let me know in the comments and follow Question Antiquity for more.
So someone had posted this. Their handle was Question Antiquity, and Improbable here is just kind of reposting it and pointing people to the information, which
Right.
is sort of like how we spread the word and get people thinking about these topics.
Exactly.
There are so many examples of this where somebody was renovating a house or they were plowing a field and they came upon even subterranean installations,
Right.
you know, and objects embedded in stone, like the old iron hammer example where, you know, geologists will tell you based on the sediment, where it is in the sediment, we can sort of guesstimate how old it is. But what happens when you find a tool made of a certain kind of metal that didn't come about until much later in where the geologists would say this thing was found?
Right.
What does that mean? It either means that the geologist is wrong about the time of the accumulation of topsoil, or it means that the historians, paleontologists who said that we didn't get bronze or iron, for example, capabilities until X year, they're wrong. One of them is wrong, or both.
Or both of them are wrong. And that we're just discovering the buried superstructures that have been lying beneath our feet, literally, for who knows how long. And it calls into question the entire so-called veracity of dating things, whether that's carbon dating or it basically becomes a guessing game to a great extent. And it calls into question a lot of the historicity of documents and just the entire calendared measurement accuracy of historical timelines.
Yeah, it is so interesting that like we use carbon to date things, as well as like carbon is this big boogeyman with the climate change thing. But I found you've brought up before the problems of radiocarbon dating and how we can't necessarily rely. This is not just your opinion.
No.
It's also Stanford's opinion. And I think I saw, Carnegie Mellon and a couple of other, you know, so-called esteemed, institutions. And I'm not disputing their observations, but what they're observing is in line with what you're saying, that in fact, the reference point for radiocarbon, you know, decay, it actually varies, you know, like based on where you're taking the sample from. And they point out in some, and I have a thing up here, nobody can read it, but just to sort of corroborate what I'm saying, that, you know, you just type in inaccuracies in radiocarbon dating, et cetera, and you'll find plenty of links to this. But in one of them, they talk about certain historical organizations and observers, you know, people who fancy themselves historians, go back and forth about very specific dates and events. And what they point out is the degree of error caused by these problems they're pointing out with the reference point is so significant that it sort of invalidates this quibbling that they have about this year or that year when things happen. And so like if that is out the window, we kind of have to relook at how we evaluate the age of things. Absolutely.
And the onion of the primary source, right? The more you dig past, you know, what you think is a primary source is actually a copy or a pseudepigraphic rendition of another work, and then you look at that work and that's actually operates under a pseudonym, and it's just like this onion. You keep trying to to peel back and find what the true primary source of anything is, and it's a giant labyrinth. It just continues to go all the way down, and there's so many things that are worth questioning along the way that you have to just end up believing in a narrative in order to come to some kind of so-called legitimate or authenticated solution about any given topic along these lines. And it's the term history itself kind of gives you a little bit of a lexicographic hint that it's a story. It's a high story. For all we know, people just dreamed up a lot of these accounts and figures and superimposed them onto the record by forging whole cloth evidence of a group or a person or an organization or event that never actually occurred. And there's actually many instances of this throughout history, and that meanwhile, hard evidence that is discovered that contradicts a so-called manufactured consensus narrative about history is then disposed of very quickly. So it gives you this realization.
Yeah, you don't ever get any apologies from the official historical academic community.
Never.
Or retractions.
Never.
And revisions.
Extremely rarely.
And I mean, this is a low-hanging fruit from my perspective. A lot of this stuff might be baseline for you listening, but we're hoping to expand our network and the topics we discuss, and maybe we'll hopefully expose some people to something that they haven't been exposed to before. But what I was going to say is the pyramid is like the kind of the one of the approved structures that everybody's allowed to question, but what's left out of that conversation oftentimes is that the Egyptian pyramids are not the only ones, and that they're everywhere, including Antarctica.
Yeah, every single continent.
So almost forget for a moment how those were built, although that's a valid question. But what?
Right.
What do you mean? They're all over the world in supposed cultures that were distant and different from one another and not existing in the same epoch.
And would have had no contact supposedly with
is
a
that like?
civilization.
Am I supposed to believe that was 100th monkey syndrome? Like, at some point, inevitably, since someone built a pyramid, cultures are going to just pick up on that through the ether and enslave thousands of people and do this backbreaking work. It's an insane narrative.
Yeah.
But that's often left out of the conversation. They don't tell you that in public school when they talk about the pyramids. They just talk about the ones in Egypt.
Right. Because
maybe the Mayan ones, maybe
a little bit, but they don't talk about the ones in Russia.
Right.
They don't talk about the ones in Australia. They don't talk about the ones in Antarctica. They don't talk about the ones in North America. They don't talk about the ones in other parts of Africa or even Northern Europe. I mean, it's on there. There's some sort of monolithic, inexplicable structural continuity that defies all of these different, progress of the ages and civilizational teleology and all of these narratives that we've come to accept. And I think that it's largely scripted. I think most of what we call history, most of what we call, hard and fast, settled, discoveries and realizations. I'm not saying all, but there's a massive amount more than what people are letting on.
Yeah. And this is a pretty recent revelation for me, even though I've been, a globe skeptic for a while. I didn't really appreciate that fact either, that it wasn't just some of these, like a few of these ancient constructions that were very perplexing. It's now for me a a lot more than that. Like, and we'll talk about this, the mud flood theory, and the idea that, of course, I mean, it's not a new idea, the idea that there was some cataclysmic flood, but people don't, and I'm guilty of this as well. I didn't then also consider, if there was such a flood, well, what would that do to the landscape, the topography, and the constructions that were there before? And this is what The Improbable Dreamer points out, Question Antiquity points out, many other channels out there who are asking these same questions. Mind Unveiled, who we talked about on our last show, is that many of the, and you've talked about for a while, that many of these supposed contemporary, albeit outstanding constructions are in fact not necessarily contemporary, but are basically facelift excavations that took place. More like found property.
Exactly.
And then renovated on top of.
Yep.
And
made to look like we constructed it when in fact we had just inherited a buried or slightly dilapidated version that we maybe partially improved upon and constructed and put signage on it, or put like a stucco facade around it to make it look like we were the original architects of it, that we were the original, that everything was originally constructed by us in our current size. But I think that this I would call it sort of a form of anthropocentrism, right? We want to think that the whole world has been more or less the same as what we experience today, on a objective or physical level, and that for all intents and purposes we've been the same size for millions of years, and that there's just a missing link out there that ties us back to the apes.
Right.
I just think that it's, if you really investigate the devil's in the details. If you look at the details, there's so many details that counteract, contradict, and counter signal that narrative, that it's important to broaden your horizon and realize, I have a will to believe in these narratives because it gives me a sense of meaning. It gives me a overall gestalt and a mental picture about the way things have come to pass. But at the end of the day, it's just my will to believe in that thing. There's no way for me to actually experientially validate, verify, or corroborate any of that data. And so the more you use that lens of realizing how much belief-based conviction there is behind our reality principles, the more you should be questioning those foundational presumptions, those foundational beliefs.
Yeah, I actually had a conversation with a colleague today on that, along those lines, and we got into some of the same topics that we got into in the last two shows around the celestial bodies. And this individual understands that I pretty much have concluded that space, as they've told us, is essentially a hoax, a sci-fi construction,
a fantasy macroatomistic projection.
And he's okay with me believing that, but he posited the question, well, I can go out to the desert and I can see a lot. I can get a telescope, I can see the planets, I can see the stars. Well, how do you explain that? And I'm like, well, I'm not the one explaining it.
Right.
I agree with you. You can see them in the desert with a telescope, but just because you see something in the sky
through an instrument,
just like a UFO, right? Like some people see it and swear it was an alien spaceship.
Right.
But that doesn't mean that it is.
Right.
It doesn't mean, like you've pointed out that such a thing as terra firma. So if you can question that and open your mind to that, you have to open your mind to, like, just, I mean, this is even much more practical, right? If a mud flood came through your neighborhood, what would your neighborhood look like after the fact? You know,
It wouldn't be a neighborhood.
so I want to play at least part of one of the Improbable Dreamer's more recent videos on his YouTube channel, just to give folks a sort of, a better sense of his content, and I think some very astute observations and questions, good zetic line of inquiry, but also a sort of visual treat now that we've sort of prefaced it. Photographic evidence. And some of these pictures I'm sure people have seen in textbooks and whatnot, but thinking about it through this lens and listening to, am I allowed to say his name?
I mean,
The Improbable Dreamer?
the doctor.
The doctor?
Yeah.
Some of the questions he's asking, I think everybody should be asking themselves. So let's check this out. We do have a call in as well. I'm going to try to verify if that's our guest or someone else.
Hello and welcome. They say history is nothing more than a set of lies agreed upon. Well, at least that's what Napoleon said. And it'll be that topic that we are exploring today, and the compilation of the mud flood and the fall of an empire. And what I hope to present to you in this short video is an alternative to the mainstream narrative. That these are not just cultural layers or basement windows buried over. That these images present a clear evidence of the mud flood, a seemingly realm-wide cataclysmic reset that left this world buried in several meters of mud. And I believe it's such an important subject to research and analyze, because we know so little of our true history. And to know where we are going and what path we are heading on, we must first know where we've been. And that is something collectively, it seems like we are nothing more than a species of amnesia. And perhaps that was thanks to the orphan trains and all these asylums that popped up all over the realm around the period of the last reset, which by all and best estimations puts it at around the mid to late 1800s.
That's when I can track my ancestors back to.
And what you see in a lot of these pictures from that time period, like these. This was the alleged building of the Transcontinental Railroad. It looks to me a lot more like the unburying of a railroad.
Right.
And this isn't the only imagery or evidence of such railroads being discovered just completely buried under meters of soil. There's been complete tracks uncovered in the United States, in Georgia, and in Russia fairly recently. And I believe even a whole entire train yard was found in the UK. The statues are always what really kind of sold the idea of the mud flood for me, at least. I mean, they say cultural layers, but it just doesn't explain the most famous statues like the Eastern Island heads. these Egyptian sculptures and statues. They're just completely buried and forgotten. And look at how happy they are when they find them. But of course, the most famous ones, the ones that we learned were just the Easter Island heads, actually ended up being the Easter Island bodies. And of course, tragically, more recently, they somehow caught fire and were irreversibly damaged according to the local government. Just another part of history that's lost to us. But once scientists decided to start burying down, they found these entire well-carved and intricate whole entire bodies to these Easter Island heads. And why it took them so long to actually discover this is beyond me, but whether they knew already, I'm sure, but the disclosure. And there's just no explanation in the mainstream why an island would just be completely covered. And that's the same thing with the cultural layer and the accumulation of topsoil. They can't explain it why in some areas they seem to accumulate more. Some areas actually seem to lose topsoil. But we seem to be accumulating it by these pictures at a rapid rate. And it's everywhere you find. From the old world, the old country as it were, to America. Buried statues, buried buildings, complete floors of buried buildings. And it wasn't always just the mud. When you look at some of these pictures, it almost looks like melting of stone and brick, deforming the structures.
That's bizarre.
And it's the same everywhere you look. Whether it's Rome, Kansas City, Missouri, people unburying the cities. These aren't laying of pipes or a random statue they just rediscovered in China. This is several meters layers of mud, seemingly coming out of nowhere. And it's not buildings left to ruin that we build on top of old. No, these are the same buildings, with just layers of them being forgotten here in DC. This doesn't look like a renovation work. You can see the towers and those pillars continuing on down, way underground. And of course, nice and covering it all up right there, so you can't really see the fine details. But for those with open eyes, they can see. And beautiful mosaic floors, found once again under several meters of mud. Structures and archways.
I'll just stop it right there, because I'm thinking of so many different things. I think you dropped something in the Telegram.
Oh yeah.
Where is it? The Shell Cave.
Yes. That's a. I think it's that. I think that's it right there.
Yeah. Or no. Yeah, you're right.
Yeah, that was it. Yeah,
The Shell Grotto.
Yep.
Pull that up. Oh, this is just so crazy. A shell grotto is a type of folly, a grotto decorated with seashells. Well, where's the one?
The Rasicek Grot.
Sorry, I'm not doing this so fast. I'm not Jamie over here. It's an underground cave in an English town of Margate in the county of Kent. The cave houses a mosaic made of 4.6 million shells.
Discovered by accident. Its origin still remains unknown.
Yeah, this is not the best site. Yeah, discovered by accident. Its origin is still unknown. Yeah, and they're just, it's like there's just a hole in the ground.
Right.
And you come into this. It's insane.
I mean, how deep does it really go? You know, that's the big question. It's like, and how much of like the orphan trains are still happening, but underground?
Right.
You know, like we think that all this stuff is just in the past, but we just don't know the extent to which it actually was the case. And so there's so much mystery and kind of ambiguity as to the extent of the realm that we just have no purview about, and we've been sold a bill of goods that renders us incurious about the reality in which we're living. So I think that our attempts at trying to, you know, settle a scientific narrative about these things always hoists itself by its own petard, because every so-called bit of settled science is vulnerable to being completely discarded epistemologically with some new hypothesis or some new revelation and some new discovery. And so there is no such thing as settled science. And I think that needs to be really understood.
Yeah, to your point, I mean, lobotomies used to be settled science,
right,
at one point. And for you guys listening, I've got an image up here stating, yeah, lobotomy represented the leading edge of psychiatric science. And in 1949, the inventor of the procedure was awarded the Nobel Prize for its discovery.
Well, yeah, and even today, we've got, 75-80% of municipalities still adding fluoride to the water supply, because the settled science is that, it's good for your teeth even if you just ingest it.
Yeah. But the lobotomy was probably a routine procedure in these orphan mills that the Dreamer mentioned. And on that note, I've got a caller in the queue. I'm not sure if this is the Dreamer himself or someone else. It's a 760 area code. I'm going to drop you in. Can you hear me? Are you there?
Yeah, it's Eric.
Oh, hi, Eric.
What's up, Eric?
Awesome. I thought it might be you. That's a California area code, if I'm not mistaken. So thank you for joining us on the 39th ZTITIC Newscast. I thought this would be a good point to drop you in because, number one, I thought it might be you. And I know you have a background in psychiatric help and mental health social services. And we talked a little bit about the orphan sort of mills that were set up, especially in North America, the orphan trains and all these, basically they call them insane asylums or mental health institutions, blah, blah, blah. And then here we are talking about settled science and how lobotomies, well, how do they render you? They basically render you a robot, a zombie. And one of the things that our guest who was supposed to join, I'm not sure what happened. Hope everything's all right. We'll get back up with him, I guess, another time, unless he dials in some point before the end of the show, you know, that, well, what was that really about? Was it really, we just have so many of these and we have to have some way to deal with them? Or was there, if there's some sort of reset that happened, like a reprogramming that took place? And we all, I know you know this, Eric, because you've been on the show before, there's reprogramming going on right now. So what did it look like, you know, 100 years ago or 150 years ago? What are your thoughts on that and what we've been talking about today so far?
I mean, it looks like it was just a great migration, probably from one space in Antarctica to this space, and they used the psychiatric cathedrals and the children and the trains and migrated the west.
It's wild. I mean, do you think that the lobotomy is almost like the original
TV?
Or I was gonna say the Men in Black memory eraser stick. You know, it's kind of like, oh well, in One Flew Over the Cuckoo's Nest, right? It's this kind of specter in the background that everyone's afraid of, because even the most, you know, raucous, you know, uncontrollable, you know, make yourself ungovernable type can be rendered completely docile. If you
tame. Weren't seeing all the text on this meme I have up right now, and Eric, hopefully you're seeing what we're showing on the video component of this, you might think, if you're answering in 2022, this is just a routine procedure with the swabbing that goes on. So are we being given lobotomies before we even get the vax?
Like a micro lobotomy.
Got to get tested.
I mean, we're getting lobotomized. I mean, just speaking like pharmaceutical. I mean, psychiatric drugs is a form of lobotomy. I mean, we're getting lobotomized with our knowledge of self, TV, everything, brainwashing and lobotomizing.
Fluoride.
I mean, GMO.
Right.
I mean, it's all transhumanism and programming.
What do you think about this whole idea of most of our sort of habitat these days, the big city constructions and whatnot, are just sort of discovered, found infrastructure, and in fact, who knows what kind of layers are beneath us? I mean, in our last show, we talked about the admitted, I mean, we're talking about, this is on PBS, UNC TV, an underground tunnel network underneath Asheville, going underneath the Freemason temple all the way up to the steps of the Biltmore.
All the way up to the Grove Park Arcade, too. Which is, I mean, that's huge. That's a massive tunnel system.
Just the tunnel run the electric generator, which supposedly Edison worked with them on. It's like a 2-mile tunnel to this body of water, which they use in the, I think it's called a dynamo or something. This was all done in horse and buggy. So what is your thought on all that subject matter?
I mean, for me, there's obviously an advanced civilization, and I think we've just been migrated on top of it. They diffuse the truth, and like you were mentioning, like the pyramids, we're allowed to kind of talk about the pyramids. They diffuse it through like a Graham Hancock. They diffuse it through science fiction.
Right.
And it just gets washed away. I mean, you made a great point. There's no accountability in science. No accountability, and it's just like, we're just seeing it now with just the vaccines. There's just no accountability. It's like, I mean, they keep doubling down, tripling down. So it's just like, it's again, we're part of this whitewashing. Just this, we get this update, and our whole species is in this kind of fast-paced survival mode, fight or flight. We're being poisoned and changed biologically, chemically, psychologically, in every sense. So it's like we just can't even get any recall. And then if we do sit and do some recall, it's so confusing, right? Because there's really no sound signs to anything. Then it starts getting really polarized and getting cultish, and it's hard for people even to get together.
Yeah, and it's almost like we're like little ants in like this giant test facility, or this vivarium where we're being experimented on actively, and then told that, everything's so chaotic, and no one can control anything, and no one can actually coordinate anything, and we're just naturally selected hairless apes that are dog eat dog world, man, and we're whizzing through space on a giant space testicle, and this is just the way things are. I mean, people.
The economy's.
Yeah, and the economy crashes because there's just boom and bust cycles, and everything's just business as usual, and there's no conflict of interest anywhere, and our reality principles are they're totally sound.
Yeah, it's pure absurdity and insanity. So I think like an average mind confronting it, just it's too much.
Yeah,
and it's
totally overwhelmed by it.
And I think that's kind of like it's a great example of our debt, our financial debt. I mean the debt is just so big. I mean, we're not going to pay it off.
No,
never plan.
Yeah.
Keep moving.
Well, and then
change the currency.
It's like they give you little, crumbs from the table. What was it recently? The Bank of International Settlements came out and said, "Oh yeah, we found this extra $80 trillion in foreign exchange swap debt."
What?
Yeah.
Yeah.
We don't really know where this came from. We're not really sure. Blah 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 blah. Bank of International Settlements. There's $60 trillion plus in outstanding currency swap debt in the dollar denominated system.
The government brilliant, but if I get a $600 or more thing from Venmo, I have to report it.
Right, we're going to send you a 1099K. You better report that $603 transaction, you little pleb. Meanwhile, we don't know where the $80 trillion went. It's a blind spot.
Yeah, we're totally in the shadow realm.
Yeah.
I mean, we're in the phantom zone 100%.
Big time. We just don't know the extent to which reality is manufactured.
Absolutely.
We just think that,
and the the Tartaria stuff, which is emerging more and more, is just, I mean, that with flat Earth and no space and NASA, and I mean, truth is definitely stranger than fiction.
Way stranger than fiction. And the thing that passes as truth, they try to make kind of strange. It's like a counterfeit strangeness that they project onto things.
Yeah.
Which is the absurdity of, we all got a common ancestor, and we all, evolved from, a giant explosion, gas, morphed into a rock, and rock morphed into liquid turned into goop, and goop turned into animal, and animal turned into human.
I just feel like everybody has every reason not to trust the official narrative of almost anything.
It's getting to be 90+%.
Like, I just learned about this from Mind Unveiled. They did a whole thing on the history of Chicago and how it's actually been mentioned on much older maps as Shalaga.
Mhm.
And within that video, he covered the raising of Chicago during the 1850s and 1860s. Engineers carried out a piecemeal raising of the level of central Chicago to lift it out of low-lying swampy grounds. And they actually say they lifted like sidewalks, the buildings, the foundations, and not only that, but they did it with jack screws, and everybody didn't even really know what was going on, and they continued to operate as normal. And
Yeah,
I don't know how that's going to work if things are sinking into swamplands. How are you going to put a jack screw? Where are you going to put that to raise such a huge construction? And to me, considering the mud flood and all that, this seems more like they just excavated more.
Right. They uncovered lower depths of the same structures that were already the case, and then just claimed that they did some, magical feat.
But then how far down does it really go?
Right. We don't
and
actually know.
They talk about in that clip we played of the Biltmore deep underground networks that a lot of these doorways and stuff to different passageways are sealed shut,
of course,
by iron doors. The city did it, or the county, or whoever, and it's just so, well, why explore? Why break that open and continue to investigate? Nothing to see here. It was just all Prohibition era tunnels underneath the bedrock in Asheville, North Carolina. Yeah, for what period of time was that Prohibition was even a thing? And you're telling me they excavated tunnels?
It'd be infinitely easier to just bribe the judges and policemen and politicians to look the other way. We already know this is the case. I mean, Prohibition didn't exist for long enough for this infrastructure to be invested in. I mean, it's absurd.
Yeah. Let me play a clip. This is a guy, Colin Furs, and he's a YouTube content creator, engineer, and he gets sponsored to do just these crazy, ridiculous projects,
cool adventures that are heavily gatekept. Of course, you've got all the approved experts there, right over his shoulder, making sure that the narrative is intact.
But I mean, I'm not going to play a long clip, but I'm just going to scrub through this so you guys can see. He digs a tunnel under his house, out to this shed and a bunker, and it's like he has like hydraulic equipment to help him, and he builds like rail lines in there to move the soil. And it's actually pretty interesting and cool to see. But as I'm watching it, I'm just thinking about the Herculean effort that's involved with this little fun little exercise. And we're talking about tiny, tiny, tiny little tunnels.
Right.
And then you can go on to Wikipedia, read that how many miles is it, like 11 miles or something? There are underground libraries at the Vatican.
I think it's like
30
dozens of
35 miles.
38 plus, I think. It might even be 50. Like it's something mind-boggling. Oh. Wait, there's a 1,500 mile. Oh yeah.
Yeah, I definitely lean there was this absolutely an advanced civilization before us. There was some type of cataclysm, and they've just been able to use some of the infrastructure. I mean, that's the World Fairs and some of the buildings, and
1,500 mile.
There was
tunnel?
more gold than you can imagine.
Sorry, 1,500 mile tunnel from Jerusalem to Vatican City. So I was off by.
Well, that looks like really old and ancient, probably.
And it makes sense where you get into the extraterrestrial thing and dumb bases and underground bases, and maybe that's where all that matches in. And then if you get into metaphysical, there's talking about the underworld, how there's another dimension below us, and so
Yeah, it's
maybe
called
all these-
down.
Right.
It's called down. That's the next dimension is down or
Yeah.
far away. You know.
Well, and the narrative is that, oh, we've only been 8 miles down, so not only does that debunk all of the so-called settled science about, oh, we're absolutely sure the layers of the ball Earth and it terminates in a molten core. I mean, that's complete speculation. There's zero evidence to suggest any of that. That's the official narrative with the 8 mile aspect, but I think that is also possibly a kind of papering over narrative as well, because that's only from the surface down in specific areas. I mean, there could be infrastructure and hidden realms ultimately that go far deeper than 8 miles, and there could be huge mega cavernous enclaves that house old pneumatic lines that traverse the entire realm. I mean, if this guy can, knock down, like on the image here on the video, this guy just there was a huge structure that his house was just kind of like dovetailed into. Like it was just like a little compartment within a bigger structure, and he was trying to remodel his house, and then came across this ancient piece of history.
It was the hidden facade of St. George's Hospital. So this was the facade of a hospital that he ran into when he tried to renovate his home.
What they're calling a hospital.
Right. Yeah, of course.
Right.
Probably an orphan mill, huh?
Exactly.
Yeah. Or something.
A giant incubation chamber, for all we know. I mean...
Yeah, speaking of incubation, that your guest, I was watching the video on the Cabbage Patch Kids, and I mean, that totally kind of comes full circle. I mean, we're definitely not going to be able to have naturally born children anymore. That's where they're taking us, and we're going to have to go through the state to incubate our children. I'm just wondering if some of that Cabbage Patch stuff was just like the tail end or the decadence of that technology that we've gotten, and then eventually we're going to move into Tesla technology. And he was talking about the blimps and ethereal electricity, and maybe we're in just some big Ouroboros.
Yeah, I like to call it the Purgatorium Divinorum. That we're in this sort of like mega chamber that the lights in the heavens that we see could be just sauna luminescent etheric crystalline aspects of the realm that's actually containing us. I mean, I don't necessarily think that these are independent bodies, gorillions of miles away. I think that they're very much tied with the happenings here on the earth and within this realm.
There's the Cabbage Patch Kids, yeah. It's just, and maybe that's just the incubators,
right?
I mean, but that's like
wow, yeah, that imagery, wow.
Yeah, this is the Mind Unveiled channel. We'd love to have him on as well.
Oh, absolutely.
Yeah, let me play a few minutes of this just to give everybody an idea what we're talking about, Cabbage Patch Kids.
As there are no websites or videos explaining this topic, we shall call it the mystery of the repopulation postcards. There are other names for this style, such as baby postcards. By the end of this video, you'll be shocked at how many of these there are. We're talking in the thousands. We found one reference to what these cards were in a book on Amazon named Babylon, Surreal Babies, in which the author describes these same peculiar 1900s postcards and how they were deeply influential to many famous artists, including Salvador Dali, Yet, the author even admits that little is known of their history. In order to understand why we've labeled them repopulation postcards, a thorough understanding of resets, Tartaria, orphan trains, incubators, asylums, and Oddfellows will be necessary. These cards depict babies being grown. There are many different styles within this category. One of the most interesting is the Cabbage Patch Babies, a variety of themes involving growing babies. Babies on plants, babies on mushrooms, babies in the water, babies in a nest, babies in eggs being hatched. Then the babies arrive on the train.
The airships.
Mm-hmm.
There's something eerie about these photos, as if someone's trying to tell us something.
Mm-hmm.
We've also got kids in Cabbage Patches. Does this have anything to do with the Cabbage Patch Kids? So where do babies come from? In the early 1900s, the most common answer given to children would simply be that the stork would bring the babies, or that they were found.
Say that again, Eric.
No, the airships coming from the other places in Antarctica.
Right. The beyond realms, and the specimens, the other part of the vivarium, and the perhaps intersplicing, genetic intersplicing that happens with our population, and that perhaps we are an experimentally derived seeded population. You know, there might be a sort of small kernel of truth about this idea of panspermia, but it's not from, you know, aliens going gorillions of miles, you know, to this random, you know, space testicle and seeding life that way. It could be from much more advanced beings that are in the beyond realms that see our current realm as really more of a leftover slag heap.
Yeah, and you look at what they I look at, like, if you look up like who the oldest person in the world is, I see that as like the same kind of fraud with who the richest person in the world is.
Right.
Because that's what they want you to think. You know, Elon Musk is the richest. No, he's not. If he has to get financing to buy Twitter, he is not the richest person in the world.
It's like in Game of Thrones, like, oh, the Lannisters are the
exactly.
richest. The Lannisters are the richest dynasty. Meanwhile, they're in debt to the Iron Bank, and there's no inventory of who the Iron Bank is or who controls the Iron Bank.
Yeah, but they'll tell you it's, like Beverly in Atlanta who's sitting on her porch, like rocking chair. And she's 105 years old, blah, blah, blah. But all the accounts of people who lived hundreds of years, and of course there's still a lot of stories coming out of Asia.
Right.
Where people, they don't even have birth records for them. But but the records that they do have when they were older are like, crazy 124, 145,
Mm-hmm.
and then even older stories of 200, 300, 400. What is a person like that able to accomplish and have access to? Like, we've talked about like the black nobility or the guy behind the curtain, the guy you don't hear about. If you saw his name, you wouldn't recognize it as like, we can all talk about like Bill Gates, bad guy,
Rothschild,
Rothschilds, but
Kissinger,
the ones
Soros,
that are really, driving things, we don't even know who they are, what they're like. So, to me, those are the aliens, because they're sort of like an unknown entity, and who knows what form they take, but someone has, whether it's in the 53-mile library under the Vatican, they said in the Wikipedia, that only a few people have access to. It's like, well, if that's in the Wikipedia about this thing that I'm allowed to know about, like what is in places I don't even know about, like there's just so much unknown, especially if you consider we could be psychologically prevented from knowing about the affairs of a country that isn't even on our map.
Exactly. Exactly. And that, our entire realm and the comptrollers here are really just, middle management to a superstructure that extends far beyond.
How easy is that to understand?
I mean,
yeah, it's a corporation.
Yeah,
all corporations are compartmentalized.
Yes.
Yeah, I mean that. Then you're getting. I mean, I definitely believe that. I definitely believe upper management is. I mean, I think the high manager is Lucifer, and then every demons and extraterrestrials, and they're all doing this, mad scientist experiment on us, and eventually it gets into our 3D realm, and you hear about it with Majestic 12 and Black Projects, and every once in a while you hear like Ed or what's his name, McCain, talking in Congress how we're all slaves and we have to. So I kind of think people in Congress already know we're under this corporation, that it's too powerful, and we just got to keep this illusion going. So I think most of them are just practicing this noble lie.
Absolutely. And the noble lie extends into areas that would just boggle the mind. And there's so many noble lies. There's such depth to the noble lie that it kind of calls into question the supposed nobleness of it. Is it really noble, or is it
Fauci.
Fauci, classic example.
The noble lie helps project the lie or conceal the lie, like the emotional congruency with the noble lie. That's how Fauci can still go on and still double and triple down. Congress can double because they're practicing a noble lie. So they project this emotional congruency of like truth and honor, and it makes most of the population defenseless. They can't recognize it.
Since you bring up Fauci, I cannot resist playing this clip. Eric, I know you lived in the great state of North Carolina at one point. This really makes me proud, to be seen as a state citizen of North Carolina. about Fauci, but others as well. Check this out.
It's gotten misinterpreted. Freedom is about rights, but it's also about responsibilities. We have a free country where we take care of each other when our actions might hurt somebody else. If you're unvaccinated and you
what would you do to protect those who you love?
The people you work with, the people you care about, the people you love.
We do not fund.
Do you fund Dr. Barrett's gain of function research?
Dr. Barrett does not doing gain of function research, and if it is, it's according to the guidelines, and it is being conducted in North Carolina.
Pandemics really are times of opportunity, and I like George R.R. Martin's quote of chaos is a ladder. There's an opportunity for people to have political gain, financial gain, and personal gain during times of social upheaval. And that will probably occur. There will be misleading stories on social media, miracle cures that will be touted, conspiracy theories. One thing that is kind of new, you could probably buy and order your own vaccine on the internet for about $200 now. So you can buy your own vaccine and probably vaccinate yourself. If you have a little bit of knowledge, and most likely somebody will come up with a scheme to sell that in a safe, in a legal way, not a safe way. The scientific community may run into all sorts of ethical dilemmas. At UNC, there's at least a dozen faculty who can have experimental vaccines already within 2 weeks. There's other groups that will be able to test drugs for ability to inhibit virus replication in cell culture that will be done within a month. And those will get published. There'll be lots of hype. There'll be news reports. None of it's FDA approved. None of it's truly safe. But if you're dealing with a 10 to 20% mortality rate, people are going to want to take it. And that leaves all kinds of ethical dilemmas around the concept of what would you do to protect those who you love.
This is not about freedom or personal choice. It's about protecting yourself and those around you, the people you work with, the people you care about, the people you love.
But interestingly, the technique that Dr. Barrett developed forces mutations by serial passage through cell culture that the mutations appear to be natural. In fact, Dr. Barrett named the technique the no-see-em technique because the mutations appear naturally. Nicholas Baker in the New York Magazine said nobody would know if the virus had been fabricated in a laboratory or grown in nature.
To the paper of Barrick and Shee in Nature Immunology, is that what you're referring? I need to know specifically.
Yeah, so Dr. Barrick and Shee printed studies on this S1 unit that was basically the development of the key to the door that was specifically took the original SARS virus and made it so it would bond to the human lung cells.
No, there was no gain. If you're referring, Senator, to gain of function, by the definition.
Okay, that's not my question.
What would you do to protect those who you love?
The people you work with, the people you care about, the people you love. My job as president is to protect all Americans. So tonight, I'm announcing that the Department of Labor is developing an emergency rule to require all employers with 100 or more employees that together employ over 80 million workers to ensure their workforces are fully vaccinated.
Someone should come up with a scheme to sell that.
Woo! Yeah, well, I mean, just the chutzpah, you know, the rampant hubris within the Psi establishment, that they can just brag about essentially heinous crimes against humanity that they're drumming up in their various ivory towers, and because they know that there's not going to be any consequences for it, because they've got their accomplices in the
it's kind of like the FTX. Sam Bankman-Fried, does he not act like a guy who seems to have some kind of assurance that he'll be all right in the wash.
I mean, he's got the same lawyer that represented Ghislaine Maxwell, so
yeah,
everything's gonna be hunky dory. He's part of the inner team, and he's got the right last name. And
but to your point, UNC Public Health, they've got 1.79 thousand subscribers, almost 2,000 subscribers. They still have this video up from which some of those clips were drawn of the Dr. Ralph Barrett. And it was posted in 2018. It's still up, called Imagining the Next Flu Pandemic and Preventing It. And to your point, the chutzpah.
The just carte blanche admission of whole cloth corrupt pseudoscientific activities. They don't really know the ramifications and repercussions of this mad scientist mania that they're participating in. They don't. They're using taxpayer dollars and black budget resources to expand the control grid, and they have accomplices within the media that will memory hole any crime, no matter the severe.
Like Kevin O'Leary, who got paid $15 million to be the FTX spokesman.
And he's like, oh.
No conflict of interest there.
Oh.
But, yeah, there was another point I thought of with chutzpah. I'm trying to find it right now, but it was Jordan Peterson talking to Bibi Netanyahu. And where is it? Here it is.
Oh, yeah.
Century, in the early 20th century, because certainly in the 19th century, in the early 20th century, there was the propaganda that I described, rewriting history, had not taken root. And most educated people knew the history of the Bible, the history of the Jewish people, their dispossession, what they thought were the horrors that the Jews suffered in their exile and dispersion, which was nothing compared to what was going to come later in the Holocaust. But that was enough for them. And they basically knew that the land was practically empty, and that there were people there, but it was practically empty, and it made sense that
practically
biblical prognostication for those who had a religious orientation and also a humanist view, that this evil of history, this injustice of history, would be corrected. That this long-suffering people, the Jews, who contributed so much to civilization and to history. And to morality, the idea of morality, it's the 10 Commandments, that became the code, the moral code of the world. And so many other things, the birth of Christianity, many of the ideas, the moral ideas that we have originated on these hills where I'm sitting in right now, this tiny, dusty edge of Asia, where this tribe, strange tribe lived here and talked about, the fact that people should not remain slaves, that there should be a law that applies to all of them, that kings are not divine, that they're subject to moral authority and censure and all sorts of other crazy ideas like that. It's all originated here. And so,
oh yeah, the Upanishads and the Code of Hammurabi, yeah, all that doesn't exist until the Ten Commandments. Give me a break.
He's going to sit there and talk about history and revisionism and propaganda. I mean, what the fuck is he doing?
Getting away with it. Getting away with just brazen overwrite. Practically empty. Yeah.
Practically nobody there.
Practically nobody. Just like,
And he calls himself the humanist.
Billions in property damage and hundreds of people dead. Oh, it's mostly peaceful protests.
Yeah.
Oh, there was practically no one there. Similar logic. Interesting.
And Jordan just laps it up.
Oh, so just total softball demeanor, so cloying and deferent and obsequious. Just, oh, please educate me, oh royal leader. Me in my humble position. Give me some of your light, oh wise one. It's been quite the saga with him. I mean, honestly, I was thinking about this. It was like, the whole 180 of Jordan Peterson really kind of happened after his whole
little episode.
Its little episode of benzos, and then being whisked away to Russia for several weeks, doing all these invasive psychological, psychiatric procedures. Was he like psychically? Was he programmed? Was he like MK Ultra? Because he's behaving like he has been.
That's another subject that is really coming to the fore now with everything that's going on with Yeezy. Is the MK Ultra
another MK Ultra
right.
agent, Manchurian candidate? Exactly. I mean, all this seems like just Manchurian candidate times 1,000. I mean, we have no idea. Did you ever see the movie Kingsman? A movie with
I fell asleep. I was in the theater. I fell asleep.
It's a very otherwise uneventful schlocky Hollywood action flick, but there is this aspect where the villain played by Samuel L. Jackson, he is a telecommunications magnate, and he divvies out all these devices everywhere, and he has like a back door that if he pushes this button, it turns all these people who have his phone into like chaotic, like mad zombies, essentially.
Wow.
So it's like, oh well, that's 100% fiction. There's nothing out there like that. There's nothing. We can't be our subconscious can't be psychically driven and remote controlled. Like that's absolutely impossible.
Yeah, I saw some videos on Instagram recently of someone setting their cell phone down where there were ants walking, and then they start walking in a circle around the cell phone. And I think we talked about it before. Actually, I'll NC State, another North Carolina link here.
Oh, here you go. This is a good one.
I actually saw their little exhibit probably back in 2012 when this was in the news, where at NC State University they basically hooked these electrodes up to these roaches, and then they were remote controlled. And it's like, why are they researching that? If not to ultimately, and then they'll say, to cure Parkinson's. Just like our friend Elon is talking about.
Neuralink.
Neuralink.
Yeah. Oh, it's all for the good of everybody. There's no ulterior motive. There's no conflict of interest.
Right.
No, you're crazy tinfoil for suspecting foul play and willful misconduct. And no one willfully does wrong. Everyone knows that everything that everyone does is in an attempt to be righteous. Of course.
Yeah, I think their overall agenda is just to get us into a virtual reality where we all look the same and all think the same, and I mean, we're right in the middle of the culling. I mean, I really do believe Fauci and the noble lie. He knows culling. I think Trump knows the culling is happening, and in their mind, like, it has to be done. The herd is out of control. The herd is sick.
Yeah, the herd might break the fences here before too long. Right. We got to thin them out before they realize they've got enough numbers to break the fencing. Yeah.
Yeah, we don't want to disrupt the nature for the hierarchy for thousands of years. They want to enjoy nature.
Right.
They gotta get rid of us, and then by that time we'll all be into Neuralink and easier to control, and they'll have their robots.
Right, and just like the orphan trains, we're supposed to believe that, oh, the MK Ultra, that ended a long time ago. It was halted in the early 70s. It's not continuing to go on. No way.
Yeah.
Oh, yeah. Go ahead.
They do MK Ultra in the open. I mean,
yeah.
Like our culture of working 40, 50 hours a week, plugging into the TV, listening to the misinformation, being chemicalized.
Yeah,
yes.
I just learned of one of the procedures done in the MK Ultra experiments. I would say industry at this point. psychic driving,
Mhm.
where they basically isolate a patient, they'd sedate them essentially and prolong them to, extended periods of time where they just hear a repeating loop of something, some
Right.
kind of phrase. I mean,
think about the radio, the modern.
that's what
like,
I'm getting to, right?
The music.
How many people do you know are like, I can't fall asleep unless the TV's on?
Exactly.
What? And they don't, especially with the advent of smart TVs. You'd be asleep and wouldn't even be able to observe if they're doing something other than what you set it to.
Mm-hmm.
And
there's all this interesting. Go ahead.
Well, just entertainment. If you notice, they all put out the same genre. Like there's all the same genre, and there's all the kind of same, driving agenda. It's just there's just differences. There's outside differences in the facade, but it's the same programming.
Absolutely. The thing that's so nefarious though about it is that they claim that it was just a misgiving in the past. We're still trying, just like Joe Biden. It's my responsibility to protect every American. I mean, who really believes that? I mean, are we supposed to believe that people have gotten to the level where they think that that's an efficacious statement? I mean,
I don't have a whole lot of contact with people close enough and a diverse enough number of people to who would actually express anything like support for a politician or whatever. And I'm a little bit biased because of that, because I imagine there are people who would argue in support of Joe Biden and say he's doing a good job. Actually, I'm neglecting to tell a story. I actually had a barber get into an argument with me who was an older man, and he told me that he did believe that. But I do wonder about the statistical prevalence of support, because when I go on Twitter and I see support, I cannot bring myself to believe that's not a bot.
Mm-hmm.
Eric, you want to say something?
Yeah, I mean, I think they've quantified what they need to do to have a certain control of our social system to continue these narratives. So I think a lot of the boomer population, they're in. They believe Biden. They still believe in right and left. They still believe in government, blah, blah, blah. And, if you have the boomers that believe it, they can hold a lot of the structure in place. And then, of course, it's the younger generation. I don't think they believe so much in it. They believe in these virtue signaling, this cultural revolution we're in. So, and then there's like the generation in the middle, we're just kind of flabbergasted. Most of us are realizing information doesn't even work at this point. They're like, we're beyond, everyone's just so whacked out. So I think they know exactly what they're doing. They're multiple steps ahead. This idea that we're winning or we're gaining ground. I mean, I don't believe that at all. I think they're in complete, utter control.
Well, because look at all of the unknown unknowns that the people are just totally not privy to, and that those are likely massive vectors of control, is what we just don't know and what we don't think about and what we'd rather not consider. And that's probably 95% of where the control is actually happening. The little 5% resolution that we think we can change, and that we're visibly affecting algorithms, and we're breaking the Overton window. Maybe, but do you really think that it's all contained within that small purview of what we think we can affect? I think that most people are missing a huge vista, the big picture element of where we are, what this existence is, how we came to be. It's just out to lunch with most people.
I'm shaking my head seeing people celebrate like we got our free speech back. with Elon taking over Twitter, and I just a moment of silence for people who think that that's actually what is happening right now. That was a good butthead impression. Yeah, I mean it's laughable. The idea that Elon actually bought Twitter himself, like he got financing. There are shareholders. You know, he is not. Well, it is interesting. Yay, and to your point, like it's fun to talk about these personalities, but at the end of the day, like there are way bigger issues, like our lost history, the level of censorship. It is not on Twitter, people. No, like, yeah, that's problematic. YouTube is egregious, but like the bigger censorship, obviously, mud flood,
lost massive civilizations, hidden contiguous civilizations.
I mean, we are literally. I mean, we still a couple steps away from, like, if you said any misinformation about government or science, you're going to lose everything. I mean, that's, it's like what's happening in China with this complete totalitarian
nightmare
system. I mean, we're right there.
Well,
yeah,
I mean, absolutely.
Mud flood, flat Earth. I mean, NASA. I mean, the financial Ponzi scheme. I mean, the hypocrisy. It's just so. I mean, it's like so far down the line.
Yeah. I mean, because at the end of the day, those things could be part of this ongoing, totally scaled up MK Ultra program of psychically driving the population towards a controlled insanity that they know how to manipulate, they know how to steer, and they know how to manage. And that it's basically like a controlled burn. You know how sometimes they'll light a fire intentionally, and it'll look like, oh my God, it's going to spread, it's going to envelop the entire forest. But it's like, no, they know the exact boundary by which they will start to extinguish it. They know the exact time frames and intervals to pull information, to seed information, to put things down the memory hole. And I just think that there's a lot more gaming going on much more sophisticated levels and dimensions than what the vast preponderance of the alt media is
even
concerned
like,
about.
Especially in the disclosure movement. I mean, there is just all sorts of confusion, just mass chaos and confusion as people try to figure it out. And I remember this guy, Corey Good, on Gaia TV talking about, he was one of these secret space program whistleblowers. And he was in this program called the 20 and Back, where he was supposed to have served his like 20 years on a Mars colony, and then when he was done, he would be age regressed and basically reinserted back into the population. And now looking back on it, I've thought about like what he said, and at the time I was open to the idea that he was actually somehow through advanced technology transported to a Mars colony. But now I'm thinking it could have just been some faraway or underground installation, and they told him it was Mars.
Exactly.
And
he wouldn't know the difference.
He wouldn't know the difference, and it blows my mind that, and you guys can look this up. I'll try to find some images, but like some of the Mars rover images that NASA sends back, like people have been able to identify actual places on Earth that line up perfectly with these images. They just color tint them, and so like, what are we dealing with really? And if you're just listening, I've got a video component here, an image of just a model of what we're kind of talking about. If Antarctica isn't this like finite block of ice that, yeah, you can go across, but you just arrive at another shore and now you're going up the other side of the earth.
Right.
If it's more like a circle, an ice wall that has a finite dimension, and then you go to other waters,
right,
other countries,
right,
and then you consider the underground networks and the rail lines that have been excavated, and who knows what kind of technology we're not even able to excavate and look at and understand. It might not have always been about the wheel. We talked about in the last couple weeks, like pneumatic tube transport systems.
And we only get this teeny little fragment of its potential when you go to the old banks and put in the little canister and push the button and
right,
mega suction all the way into the interior of the bank. Oh yeah, that's the only practical use for that technology. We can't scale that up. That's just crazy. Oh wait, what's this? Oh, they used to be all over the place, and that was actually a popular way of getting around in the late 1800s and early 1900s. And then, oh, we had to decommission that. We had to put in other utility lines and power lines and stuff. And yeah, we don't need free transport like that anymore. Or next to free transport. There's no such thing as free energy. Get back in your car. Get back in your mobile bomb that's powered by micro explosions inches from your feet. Yeah, that's the highest form of transport we've ever had. Get used to it, guys. It's like there was probably, oh wait, there definitely was prototypes for individual flight that was totally safe, totally scalable, and it was suppressed, just like Royal Raymond Rife's frequency-based electromagnetic healing chambers in 1931 was heralded the end of disease. That this was the ultimate medical technology that was discovered, and in less than 6 years, it was completely put down the rabbit hole. Everyone disavowed him, and what we got in exchange was this, petrochemical Rockefeller morass that we have today. And we're supposed to think that that's just the ultimate pinnacle of science and civilization and healing is pharmakia. It's very sad. The airships too, like this was a totally tenable way of scaling up all kinds of methods of transport. And all we get is this, apocalyptic cautionary tale like the Hindenburg. Oh man, those things are just ready to blow. No, they're so unsafe.
Yeah, that's the video. It shows the inside of the airships. I mean, they look like luxury living rooms, and you're traveling across country.
Yeah. Absolutely, like fabulous accommodation and comfort with spectacular views, a spectacular time.
Plate glass windows like you're on a train.
Yeah.
Go ahead, Eric.
I mean, I'm just, talking about like, I definitely think at the least AI is in control of this MK Ultra program, and at the worst, I think it's alien technology, whatever alien technology, extraterrestrial technology is being run. I mean, I always use the analogy of Dark City. We are definitely under this spell. There's this, some scalar magnetic electrical spell that just there's just so many different avenues of manipulation and drive and you put and you coalesce it all together, it's producing, what we see today. It's just complete hypocrisy, no accountability.
Are you serious? Look at the size of this airship.
Spectacular. Absolutely magnificent.
Wow. I didn't even appreciate that.
I mean, people could like sleep in there. There was dining chambers. It makes train travel look totally primitive, and airline travel look totally barbaric and super dangerous.
And then you think about, I had this conversation as well with a colleague about, Google Earth and our conception of how they even get those images. A lot of people think that they've got orbiting satellites
going 30,000 miles an hour.
But if you understand, NASA's the largest purchaser of helium in North America, and you actually go to some of their channels, they've got balloon platforms that, they're not even telling us really how big they are. But you look at a picture like this, and probably perma in the air.
Yeah.
And so to your point of like, are we in like a lab experiment? It seems definitely like the infrastructure, all of the censorship, the programming, like what you're saying, Eric, the scalar frequencies, all the fake cell phone towers that look like, who are they kidding? Trying to make them look like trees. And now, in Durham, they're just announcing the gunshot monitoring system that they're installed.
Oh, yeah, that's gonna work perfectly.
And so they're listening too. It's an input output, and like Elon said, social media is like an extension of your limbic system, and you're not just getting data, you're giving data to the AI.
Right.
Yeah, I would have thought the Black Swan financial event would have happened by now, but it seems almost like it's just so managed.
They're waiting on some magnificent numerological confluence when, all of the major players have enough of their resources and personnel consolidated around a trigger event that they manufacture. And so that could happen next month. It could happen 8 months from now, next year, 5 years from now. We don't know their geometric formula cauldron that they're working with, but they're absolutely working with something like that on a very sophisticated level. And for all we know, I mean, it is interfacing with some sort of high-tech artificial intelligence. Because, I mean, what? Aladdin, a literal algorithmic bot, controls trillions of dollars on the open market through BlackRock. It's like, we're not even managing our money anymore, really. It's just, it's a complete fugazi, algorithmically induced. And there's no end to that type of control. We have only a small scintilla of how deep that rabbit hole goes and where that intelligence is actually coming from, and where how the frequencies are being disseminated throughout the realm. Like, there is not an inventory of that, because all of the pertinent scientific bodies that maybe could extend resources and research that kind of thing have all circled their wagons against disclosing any kind of information that would let the genie out of the bottle, let the cat out of the bag, that we're in a manufactured artificial realm.
I think we just lost our call-in line.
Oh no.
Yeah, he's still on, but I'll have to dial back in. Oops.
This was all on the airship.
It's unbelievable.
If you're looking at this...
Thank you for calling Call-In Studios.
Sorry. Yeah, it's
we could. I mean,
I might be taking a flight next January for the first time since 2020, and seeing this is just getting me even more depressed about it.
Yeah, yeah,
because it is like an animal farm, going to the airport and dealing with it. And oh my God, I'm just dreading how it is now with the TSA, because it was atrocious before. I cannot imagine it's gotten any better.
Oh, it's gotten probably definitively worse. But yeah, I mean, look at the
accommodations,
the accommodation and the sociality, the premium that was placed on having a good time while traveling. You know?
Yeah. And now you just get
shuttled
in the line. You know, they'll pat you down. They'll steal your stuff,
or you have to risk, life and limb, with, cramped in one of these, exploding, mobile bombs called automobiles. And it's like, there's some freedom there, but there's also way more risk than there needs to be.
Yeah.
And compared to this, it's just like, how many dozens of thousands of car accidents are there every single year? And all we get is, the horror story of the Hindenburg as a reason to discontinue this elegant.
What about the Titanic and the Lusitania? Do we stop using ships?
Right.
It's idiotic.
It's idiotic. I mean, it's because there were anti-human scarcity oligarchs that wanted to use scarcity models to control huge numbers of people, that came to power and prevented a more emancipated, enlightened society by design, intentionally.
It's chronologically, it's pretty stunning how quick the decline.
It was a matter of like 20 years.
Yeah, nothing. And we're really at we're at this inflection point.
And we're seeing another fractal of it in the past 20 plus year, 21, 22 years.
Right.
I mean, do you remember how things were before 9/11?
Yes. Even before the internet.
Even before the internet. Right.
Yeah.
I mean, just going back like to the late 90s, there was just more neighborliness.
Joy.
There's more neighborliness.
Yeah.
Like people were more social. People were more curious. Even in the
heavily declined
state that we were in, it's like now it's like we're much more hyper atomized. We're much more like psychologically fragile and on a hair trigger all the time with what people might mention or say, and we've just devolved into this, accepting this hyper paternalistic, anti-human, scarcity based mindset that is exterminist and abominationist and inversionary in nature. It's completely against nature. It sees nature as a liability to be managed, to be mined, to be profited from. We have a small scintilla. We have a teeny little sliver picture of our past. And that's going to necessarily corrupt and short circuit our imagination for our potential going into the future, and that's by design. And if people are, having any doubt about that, just look into these buildings.
Yeah.
Look at the Mormon temple. Like, you really think that people in horse and buggy built that?
Right. This is 1902, Cork City, Ireland. Not only did I want to point out, this is a colorized film that someone came back and tried to colorize it, but how sharp these supposed, primitive peasant agrarian type people are dressed. I mean, they
and not a single obese person.
No. But
probably the IQ was 1 or 2 deviations higher.
It's a stark decline. Goblin mode, the Oxford word of the year.
Oh, Oxford word of the year.
It's goblin mode.
That human civilization has been put into goblin mode.
Yeah.
Under the oligarchical managed decline. The system that we've been under that is full spectrum. It's not just the media. It's not just religion. It's not just the economy. It's not just medicine. It is full spectrum dominance.
Well, look at this. Like, they have electric trolleys next to horse and buggy.
Uh-huh. Well, yeah, and it's like there was no licenses back then. You don't see any police or bobbies or, rampant
shit on the floor.
Shit everywhere. I mean, it's unbelievable.
Yeah, San Francisco just smells like pee now.
Philadelphia, Filthy-delphia. I mean, you go there, and not only can you not find a parking spot for hours, you're going by, convenience store robberies happening and literal mounds.
Where's all the
trash.
Where's all the horse shit? Probably have bags under the horses' butts, because they were smart.
They were smart, or they had a complete knowledge of the horse's metabolism and knew exactly when they needed to go and how much time they had to get to XYZ place and where they could easily dispose of the waste. I mean,
I wonder how deep these buildings go.
Probably another 60 feet.
That's just unbelievable.
Probably another 50 feet. And we're just on the surface. It brings whole new meaning to the phrase "on the shoulder of giants."
Mm.
Our entire civilization is just this little anthill on top of what used to be a massive, honeycomb infrastructure of
it's
much
so
more
crazy when you read the
beings.
stories about people deciding to add a room onto their house, and then they break into this elaborate underground labyrinth of rooms. And I've been just fascinated by this subject, and then reading people's comments. I saw this one where this guy was like, this video for me unlocked a memory where I was playing in the woods near my neighborhood with my friend, and we came upon this cave and went in there, and it was smooth block walls, and there were multiple rooms, and we went deep into it and came into this room. It had to be a greater than 10-foot ceiling, and it was just like this hole in the ground that this guy, and I think he said he was in Pennsylvania.
Mm-hmm.
And so I just when people are focused on what so and so said on Twitter, it's kind of it's fun to talk about, and it's fun to sort of get into the back and forth of
Sure.
What we're dealing with in the realm that we know. But I think it's a lot of fun to just consider what else could be out there, and at what point do we. I mean, I certainly don't want to go my whole lifetime without revelations on this subject.
And further disclosure.
MK Ultra is now in the public psyche because of Stranger Things and what Ye said, and Bill Clinton apologized for it, and people are remembering that because the video's uploaded.
And all these celebrities tweaking out
and tweaking stuff, out, and getting sort of half deprogramming, and you sort of going off the reservation, and then
robotic twitches. Right.
But I want these revelations. I want a new continent to be announced.
I mean, honestly, they keep saying, oh my God, shit's melting in Antarctica. It's
right. Is an underground civilization gonna all of a sudden be able to come into our realm?
Right. Because they've been dormant or hidden away under, who knows, perhaps a etherically induced ice sheet.
Right.
They can manipulate the weather with aerosols.
It brings to mind certain video games where there's like a force field or something you have to get through to unlock a new area.
Right.
Or awaken some sort of sleeping giant. We see that theme of the sleeping giant, right?
Yes.
As well. Or Jack and the Beanstalk, where you go up to this kingdom in the clouds and there's a fucking giant there.
Or
living his life.
Gulliver's Travels.
Right.
You know, there are these elements of so-called literature and so-called fiction that's purely in the realm of fantasy, but no, you know, Moses really came down from Mount Sinai with the tablets, and he definitely parted the sea, and you know, they definitely made the walls of Jericho come down with horns, and you know, all of that stuff is admissible. That sort of mytho-ahistorical genuflection before ancient history, but only in this very small kosher purview that you're allowed to research and be fascinated by. And meanwhile, all the other civilizations that are lost to history, oh, don't think about that.
Right.
Don't think about that. That's crazy. Tinfoil hat. Get back on the reservation.
I saw some material recently suggesting that the Great Wall of China, it's actually the defensive portion of the wall, which is very laborious to construct, right? The part of the wall that you stand behind as the invaders, it's actually on the wrong side.
Exactly.
So what the fuck is going on there? I mean, that's a huge...
Maybe
historical narrative that on a key
narrative.
detail like that can change the whole thing.
100%. And it's like, well, wait a second. Maybe our sense of dynastic narratives about these civilizations are, again, based on a rendition that is 80% omission, 90% omission. We just accept this idea that, oh, well, the civilizations and the societies and the races that we have today, well, they've kind of always been around in this form or that form, and we don't have a such thing as a lost civilization. Maybe if you read Plato, you know, when he talks about Atlantis, you know, you can dream about that, you can speculate about that, but Tartaria? No. That's reality denial. It's like, well, what if our entire reality as we know it is based on denial itself? Denial of deeper truths, deeper aspects that we're not allowed to think about. We're not allowed to talk about. And if we do talk about it, it's, oh, that's crazy. Oh. Meanwhile, there's all these little tidbits, all these little bits in popular culture and in cartoons and in science fiction where we're just supposed to suspend our disbelief and say, oh yeah, that's in the realm of fiction. That's pure fantasy. But
yeah.
Oh, Darwin and Newton and Einstein, those guys are 100% real. Those guys are talking about real things. It's like, well, maybe we're living in a topsy-turvy world, and a lot of the stuff that is bandied about as fiction and fantasy maybe has some deeper kernels of truth to it, and the stuff that's passed off as settled science and everything's hunky-dory, we know this and we know that. It's all just a bunch of papering over. It's all just a bunch of counterfeit chutzpah and hubris. I think that there's a lot of that going on. There's so many inversion narratives all over the place that there's not a lot of safe territory to say, oh, this is 100% verified, it's 100% real, you can't question it anymore, there's no dispute. It's going to be like that in perpetuity for eternity. Don't you worry your little mind, you know? There's too much of that out there. And there's a whole lot of castigation and finger waving and browbeating against anyone who has a dose of skepticism about heralded authorities in this field or that field or the other field. Meanwhile, so much data is being disclosed that contradicts these shibboleths, these established narratives, these buzzwords and catchphrases and sayings, these dead phrases that we bandy about all the time. Well, gravity works, right? It's like, well, does it? I thought it was Neil deGrasse Tyson that said we don't know what gravity is.
They still call it a theory,
Yeah,
but you're not allowed to point that simple fact out.
No, because I can drop a microphone on the ground and that's somehow isolating an independent variable. No, it's not. It's not experimental. It's just a trope. It's like a mind control trick to convince you that something is known, there's an explanation given, and no questions can be had. It's like a press release or something. It's like comic book science, I know the exact girth of Thanos' wrist because in comic book edition, 7-A, they say that the ring size of one of the power rings was this size. So I definitely know the size of Thanos' wrist. I mean, that's the level of charlatanry that's in the sciences at this point. It's comic book level precision.
Yeah.
It's precision about things that don't exist.
I think since our last show, we got into a sort of back and forth on Twitter, speaking of, with this guy about the temperatures in the thermosphere. Because we were talking about, he pinned us as flat earthers and therefore, just idiots, I guess. And, we made some points like, for example, satellites, telescope, like the Hubble, the space station. It's supposedly orbiting in this area of the thermosphere outside the Earth's atmosphere where the daily temperatures can reach 3,500 degrees. And I just asked him a basic material science question, if that's true and these things are floating around during the daytime in your model, right? What are these things made of? These constructions that we've launched up there. Supposedly. Aluminum, copper, pick your metal. They're all melting before 3,500 degrees.
Oh, but here comes the fine-tuning explanation. Well, the particles are more disparate, so it's actually really cold up there.
Right, because
it's actually really cold.
There's no air molecules in space because of this vacuum idea, which we could talk about as well. So there's no molecules to transfer the heat to you. And I'm like, well, then how do they even know that it's 3,500 degrees? Did they send a thermometer up there? And he's like, you're an idiot. They use like radio spectrometry or something to basically, you can in a laboratory setting use a laser essentially and infrared to measure the surface of something. But how do you measure the surface of something in the middle of space? You know what I'm saying? Like you don't with that type of technology, you don't have a reference point in the thermosphere with which to point these objects at.
Right.
So
and
how does that work exactly? And then if, okay, so that's how they determine it's 3,500 degrees, but you're saying there's no air molecules to transfer the heat, so it would be cold. How do you know that? And we're supposed to have launched something and gone to the moon with men on it. Oh, well, they sent monkeys before, so they knew, it's like, oh, that's just another one of those stories. Like,
Well, the thing about a fantasy environment like space is that you can infinitely fine tune it. It's based on umbrella concepts like particle density and vacuum, Kelvin level intensity of suction and all this kind of speculative stuff. But meanwhile, they supposedly train in the diametric opposite environment in the water.
Right.
How could that possibly
Translate.
translate? Oh, because what they do is they film the training exercises in the water and then give you a piece of show business after the fact where the water is rendered away and what's replaced is a photoshopped environment that, because you've been conditioned to believe that that environment exists, you think it's totally plausible that that's what space is like. And
yeah, I mean, I guess
very sad
for
that people
them
still
to
think, space
mimic
is real.
For them to mimic what they say space is like. Wouldn't they have to like send them down in suits that were inflated to a degree where you wouldn't go up or down because you have no gravity or relative, you know what I'm saying?
Right, there's no relative density.
Because you're either going to be sinking because of the density of the suits and everything, or you're going to be floating, neither of which mimics a no gravity scenario.
Absolutely.
So, I mean, yeah, they perform spacewalks underwater.
Oh yeah, and they're supposedly practicing for a polar opposite environment. In the exact suits that we say are supposedly just for space.
And so it's watertight and
vacuum tight.
Vacuum tight, yeah.
Oh yeah, there can't be any chicanery going on with this production right here. There can't be any possibility for visual manipulation of the surrounding environment within these people in water suits right now.
Mm-hmm.
Oh, of course not. Everything is perfectly transparent. NASA's one of the only government agencies that is never going to lie to you. It's never going to use tax dollars to grift the population under fraudulent pretenses. Oh no! They're a completely legitimate scientific organization. Why would they lie? Why would the Government Accountability Office lie about the Pentagon audit? They're just looking at numbers. Numbers are real.
Didn't Dude Perfect go to space recently? Did you see this, right?
Oh yeah, another one of the PR stunts. Yeah. Oh, is this going to be like another Red Bull jump kind of thing where, oh yeah, man, I'm gonna do a base jump down onto the continent of New Mexico. Look at my fisheye lens. I mean, that's the real curve of the Earth. And yeah, man.
I love all this technological progress, and it's really cool what Elon's doing with SpaceX.
Yeah.
You can launch a rocket and you can see it land, vertically. But this is like the pinnacle of our exploration, right? Is to basically be on a theme park ride.
Yep.
Just go up, come down. How cool was that?
Globe is real.
Globe is real.
And
we're making progress. Like, so much more progress could be made if we spent billions of dollars on excavation.
Trillions at this point. We could probably discover a whole new city for free. No, we've got to waste it on metal space dick rituals.
It definitely is so phallic.
It's deliberately so. Yeah, man.
Right.
This is the progress of the ages right here. Look at that. Whoa, man.
Yeah, this is another.
This is
it's
the
funny.
future.
Took my kids to the Museum of Life and
joke.
Science, right? And I've talked about that in past shows. And we got one of the space shuttles at the gift shop, and he correctly identified it as an airplane. Because it's not a space shuttle, right?
That's right.
And you know what they call it? We talked about this, but I don't think we've talked about it on the show. They call it the flying brickyard.
Right.
Because they supposedly lined the shell of the space shuttle with these silica bricks that they made out of sand, something like a sand that's...
Oh, that's looking pretty flat out the window there.
Yeah.
Oh, wait.
Here goes the moment of zero G.
Oh, wait. Still looking real flat out that window. Uh-huh. Oh, there's the movie magic.
And they are using a GoPro.
Yeah. Which has a fisheye lens.
Spherical aberration.
Yeah.
All lenses have some degree of spherical aberration. The ones that are less affected, you might only notice it in the top 4 corners of the lens. But like that's clearly, I mean, that's the one that he used.
There it is. Look, it's warping.
Yeah,
it's clearly
obvious.
spherical aberration on the lens.
Look at how it changed. Look at how the curve actually changed in real time. Right,
real
there.
time. It's look at that.
Look, it's flat. It's more flat there, and then when he tilts it down, which makes sense because it'll be at the edge of the lens, it's going to do it more dramatically.
Artificial rotundity.
Wow.
Artificial rotundity, guys. It's trickery.
But what I was saying about the heat shield is they say they put these bricks on it for, you know, every flight in, they like burn off so the rest of the shuttle doesn't melt. Okay, and these bricks are so poor at heat conduction. You know, they say they could be like red hot, but you touch them and they don't transfer the heat to you. But how could it be red hot? And they said it takes let me find it. 2 years labor every time they conduct a flight, because you've got 24,300 tiles, and the glue used to put it on there dries so quickly that they needed to basically mix the glue every couple of tiles.
Oh, please.
And then it says, you were saying the phallic dick ritual, it's just like they're slapping you in the face with the hoax, right?
Yeah.
They say an ad hoc remedy that involved technicians spitting in the glue to slow down the drying process was common practice until 1988, when a tile hazard study revealed that the spit weakened the adhesive's bonding strength. And it's like, if spitting in the glue makes it more of a useful material to work faster, couldn't they have just manufactured it with more moisture to begin with? I mean, when you read about the glue, they basically describe it like bathroom caulk.
Right.
And I think they're just making this bullshit story. They're making fun of us.
Absolutely.
They're trying. It's a humiliation ritual.
And they use bodily fluids and scummy sort of refuse, just like their whole yarn about, oh, they left after all the Apollo missions. You know, astronauts got to go to the bathroom. They left 66 bags of poopy on the moon.
Right.
Look it up. Look that up. You think I'm lying about that? No. 60. I think it is literally 66 bags of poop.
66 or 33.
Something like that.
96.
Oh, 96. Okay.
Why NASA wants to bring back 96 bags of poop. I guess they're having a hard. I guess they're having a hard time getting a stool sample out of old Buzz Aldrin, and they need to go do some analysis, check his levels.
I mean, it's just so in your face.
Yeah.
And it's like, and then we gotta spit on the outside.
Spit all over the space shuttle.
We gotta spit all over that big giant thing. Come on.
But I guess because it's covered in bricks, it needs this huge rocket to fly it up there, and then I don't know, like, I don't know how it can be cold up there where the space shuttle is, and this, but also so hot you need all these bricks.
And then remember the entire absurdist narrative about, we had to construct the International Space Station in space.
Right.
We had to, in an environment that we cannot replicate in any way, shape, or form, we were able to build a working piece of completely unaerodynamic bloatware in the sky by putting a bunch of materials on the space dicks to go up into the sky, and that's how we manufactured it up there. It's malarkey. Space is fake and gay. Okay? It's fake. And believing in this one lone, scientifically legitimate government agency really doing the best that they can to figure this out. And for the next stage of human evolution, we will rely on space dicks to take us wherever we need to go. Maybe 20 gorillion miles away. But we don't age as fast in space if we're going fast enough, remember?
Right.
Einstein figured that.
That's how you time travel. You fly in a space stick, the speed of light, and then you fly back. If you're going the speed of light, you'll come back, in the future.
Yeah. Yeah, Einstein, the brilliant plagiarist, figured that one out. And, this is, in a lot of ways, once you realize the chicanery and the obvious charlatanry
Here's
here.
another example, right? We're playing some video if you're just listening to the NASA balloon program, which we talked about many times here, and also in relation to the airship situation that we talked about earlier. But yeah, they're showing some video from one of these balloon platforms they're launching in Antarctica. It's another clear example of spherical aberration on the lens. Look how the curve of the Earth is actually, Neil deGrasse, if you're listening, it changes in real time, like at a drastic rate. Like, that's crazy that they passed that off as the curve images.
Right.
Well, it's really hard to get a picture from far enough away. So we can only seem to just get pictures from this, 500 miles up, supposedly?
Oh, but I thought we took a picture of the moon, or the Earth when we were on the moon, and, wait, it was basically the same size.
Yeah.
As what, but I thought the Earth was like 5 times, or 3 times, 4 times bigger than the moon. Wouldn't it be a lot bigger? Amidst a bunch of really high definition stars. Oh, no, you can't see any stars.
Oh, don't you know anything about photography? You can't expose that in the foreground and the background properly. Wait, why not?
Wait, why not? Don't we have like super sophisticated digital 5 million megapixel imaging?
If you need to do a long exposure, you could. We do that on Earth all the time with light pollution, and you can capture the stars, no problem.
No problem.
It's just a bunch of excuses, and
it's a bunch of umbrella fine-tuning lies, and that's why it's called the sci-lie paradigm. It's theft combined with fraud, combined with fakery.
Movie magic,
power of suggestion, and yes, hypnotic relay based on inculcation and psychic driving from the time you're a small kid. Because we are psychically driven. I mean, imagine, you remember before we really dove into this, 6 years ago in terms of this content before Zetetic was born. ZNN was born. I just had to do a mental inventory of how many dozens of hours I had been shown this fantasy environment in one form of entertainment or another as though it were real. I mean, it's easily in the hundreds of hours.
And now that I have kids, I am way more in tune with, and of course where I'm at, with this subject matter,
right?
Way more in tune with how early that starts. I mean, it's from the very beginning.
Very beginning, basically.
I was actually at my daughter's dance class.
crib toys, little crib mobiles that are planets.
Right,
and, come on. Like, it's like
from birth, basically.
You're conditioned from birth with a false cosmology to believe in a bunch of fraudulent, sci-li, paradigmatic control.
Yeah, I was at my daughter's dance class the other day, and she brought me a book that was there at the little play area to read before class, and it was a VeggieTales book, which is a Christian cartoon, and they mixed in the Christian message and verses with a space story, and of course it had some moral about like sharing or something like that, but like the literal first page is a robot, and there's a Bible verse there about I am your God, and I forget the verse, but I'm going to take a picture of that and we'll talk about it. Maybe we'll do a little special video, because I'm like, here we have a very good example of what we're talking about. Very early inculcation of both as a belief structure.
Yes, and they're complementary.
Yeah,
and just like I mentioned before, like the mystery school, pre-Christian era hieratic rites, blended with all of the Abrahamist apocalyptic cult theology, has produced essentially astrotheology.
Yeah, you brought this up to Adam Green previously, and I've dabbled with the material, and I had time to sort of reflect on our conversations and do some of my own research, and I was like, man, Xavier is not fucking around. Just look up celestial spheres or celestial orbs on Wikipedia, and there's this huge entry about how it's the fundamental entities of the cosmological models developed by Plato, Eudoxus, Aristotle, Ptolemy, Copernicus. I mean,
it's ball worship. It's sphere worship.
Ball worship.
It's sphere cuckery from 2,800 years ago.
And then I look up this thing.
Oh yeah, and wait, didn't they come out with an admission that actually the moon is still within the atmosphere, the spherical atmosphere of the Earth?
Right.
Oh, the atmosphere, it extends a lot more.
So look
the
at
Earth.
this. So I was doing my digging on this,
Total
right?
fakery.
And we all know that our ancestors used the stars for navigation with a sextant, right? Which actually
is a planar instrument.
But in modern astronomy and navigation, the celestial sphere is an imaginary sphere of arbitrarily large radius concentric with Earth. All objects in the observer's sky can be thought of as projected upon the inside surface of the celestial sphere.
Imaginary projection.
As if it were the underside of a dome.
As if.
And then they will make fun of you for talking about a dome. When they're the ones actually imagining one.
Underneath your feet.
It's...
Come on. I mean, it's like...
Wake up, Adam.
Yeah. And all of the rest of the alt-right, you guys are good about a lot of stuff, but man, when it comes to the sci-li, genuflection, and this, the worshiping of balls, y'all are still like 5 years old in the ball pit, in McDonald's, in Burger King.
On your knees, sucking the space dick and choking on the balls.
Yeah, and all the spit that's all over the spacecraft too.
Right.
To keep those bricks from falling off.
And those
you have to admit that all of this is supposedly scientific. And because there's models and there's graphs and there's lines, and there's equations and there's alphanumeric sequences, that just completely intellectually cucks all of y'all. You think that, oh, that's absolutely scientific. There's no ifs, ands, or buts about the presumptions and the axiomatic declarations behind any of it. I totally believe it. There's the key word there. Totally believe it. Because it's just a will to believe. Because you have no other frame of reference, and you've been enculturated to think that anyone who questions it is just dumb. Meanwhile, all of your supposed intelligence about this is vicarious. You have no basis for proving any of it. Not forensically, not experientially. You have to just take all this modeling and all this ball worship at face value and pretend that it's real.
Yeah. And we are in a land of pretend now.
Clown world is pretend world.
If people are going to, pretend to be sick.
Pretend to be men when they're women. Pretend to be women when they're men. I mean, yeah, we're just going to pretend we're on a ball when there's hundreds of millions of square miles of demonstrably level surface area, including the oceans. It's a ball. It's just like, you guys are idiots. Like, just wake up to the fact that there's a huge plantation, big picture deception that extends well beyond any of your special topics. Well beyond, you're chipping away at the surface just like post-mud flood populations. Have no idea how to build these structures, but we're going to take credit for them because we can live in them. The small fraction of them that is accessible to us.
Most people don't know that the successor to Hubble, Sophia, this device that supposedly renders these images, but they're actually Photoshop. It flies on an airplane.
Yeah.
The best they can do is fly it on an airplane, get above the clouds, and point it up.
It's not out in the space world.
Think about it. If these objects are so far away, what difference does it make if they fly an additional 35,000 feet in the air? Even that story is just ridiculous.
Isn't that wild that all these supposed, deep space images are just concocted from an airplane or a balloon platform?
Look, climb aboard a Boeing 747 that NASA turned into the world's biggest flying telescope.
Yeah.
Just look at that.
Oh, there's your Hubble.
That guy looks like
whoa,
Christopher Lloyd from Back to the Future.
Marty, we need 100 gigawatts of energy to power our telescope.
Look at that. I love all the equipment they show us. It's always got, it's so haphazard, wires everywhere, make it look way more complicated, and it's always like really messy. They are not, I see people with like home audio setups with neater wiring. I don't know, with all these billions of dollars, you'd think they'd be able to like get that a little tighter.
Well, but I mean, they don't need to, because people have been conditioned to just accept it as real. The people accept the reality with which they're presented.
Stratospheric Observatory for Infrared Astronomy, and look, we got a German flag next to that.
Oh, it says Sophia.
That makes sense, actually, because of all the Nazi influence in our so-called space program.
Well, I mean, you need to dump trillions of dollars into making adult cartoons. I mean, that's basically what the sci-li Masonic space astrofarce industry is all about. It's about creating a massive paper tiger of legitimacy that, meanwhile, the end result is just cartoons and empty promises. And how many trillions of dollars have been flushed down the black hole, that the only real black hole in existence, which is NASA.
Look at that fake image of the moon. That's not a photograph that our shit took.
Nope, that would be Photoshop. That would be
Photoshop.
Entirely computer rendered. It's just power of suggestion, imaginary projectionism. Okay, and it has power. It clearly has power. It clearly has the ability to manipulate people's perception, or else we wouldn't have it today. It's just like religion. You know, there has to be some kind of efficacy behind the ability to control people theologically in order for us to have these religions today. It's the same thing with these pseudosciences, this reductionistic, materialistic, fake cosmology that we've inherited. It's informed by the same charlatanry that brought you the Abrahamic plantation to a great extent. It's Masonically scripted.
It seems like it's of the same cloth.
It maybe, if it's not the same cloth, it's the same tailors who are working with the cloth. It's a bunch of occult, alarming demagogues absconding with wealth and exchanging lies for it. I mean, just because it's got a veneer of technique, and there's not an explicit mention of a creator or a god, it doesn't mean it's any less of a religion when you excavate all the lies and the chicanery that are involved with it.
That was a point I made to my colleague I was speaking to earlier today regarding his comments about, well, if I get a telescope, I go out to the desert, I see this. And it's like,
so
that's fine.
I love seeing that stuff.
Yeah.
Seeing is not
and
knowing.
wondering about it. But the very next step is concluding that it's this, which you didn't see when you went out to the desert. You only heard it from someone like NASA.
You superimposed what you were told onto your frame of reference and then concluded along something that was just inherited. You just inherited. It was just given to you as an explanation. You have no way of verifying that explanation.
Right.
Zero.
So like, yeah, exactly. And like, look at these images that this is what this telescope is capturing. Does that look like any star field that you see like in a NASA propaganda magazine?
In the adult
where they
cartoons.
show you like what we showed just a minute ago with all those stars and the gases of the galaxy? Does that look like that? Oh no, well, this is an infrared camera. There's multiple layers of data and they have to basically patch it together. And I'm like, oh, so that's an artistic rendition.
100%.
And yeah, that's what I was trying to elaborate to my friend, that just because you see these things, yeah, you superimpose what you've been told onto them.
Yep.
And he's like, well, how do you explain the things that you see? And I'm like,
I don't have an explanation.
I'm not the one with an explanation.
I don't need an explanation to tell you that your explanation is false. You don't need a counter explanation to lay bare that a contemporary explanation or a manufactured consensus explanation is false. I mean, if I was to wager a guess, because estimation is really all you have left, I would say that it's of a etheric nature. We're not actually capturing those lights in their true nature, in their true form, with this instrumentation, with this superimposed frame of reference that we project onto the phenomena, as though that projection is in itself a process whereby we can glean certainty about the phenomena. It's not. It's just fine-tuning an explanation that is regurgitated, that is adapted and massaged over time.
Yeah. What are the chances that Wernher von Braun predicted a man named Elon would eventually be the first to explore Mars, and then Elon, launches SpaceX and is one of the largest Pentagon contractors, and he's this character, and then Yeezy's out there saying he's one of maybe 10 or 30 Elons, clones, essentially, hybrids. I mean, I have been wondering for a while, who the fuck is this guy? Is he another hologram like Hologram Joe?
Well, let's look at an obvious puppet operation, Stephen Hawking. Wait, see, what's the runner-up for his condition that he supposedly had for 40 some odd years? I think that the runner-up for that disease lived 5 years, if I'm not mistaken. So he 8x'd, 9x'd the medical possibility of living with this condition. Meanwhile, he has magical technology that reads his mind and translates it to roboticized speech. That there is no other example of that, really. And if you look at the actual personage that they keep wheeling out, it's a different person. It was probably 5 or 6 different persons that they used over a long period of time to just advance this complete cockamamie, laughing stock pseudoscience that was expanding the implications of Einstein's metaphysical pseudoscience. And we're just supposed to believe this guy was the smartest person that ever basically lived for, what, 50 years or something? Wasn't he bandied about as the top?
He's the Magic Johnson of ALS.
Basically, yes. But if you look at the extent to which he survived with this condition, and the various dubious personnel that were wheeled out to represent this particular personage, this Stephen Hawking puppet, this character, you will see that they had to retire him right as a lot of the Globe's skepticism was really taking off. Because because
you can't have him answering.
No, you can't have him
doing
answering.
Interviews.
Absolutely not. And there was a researcher who delved into this topic. Unfortunately, he recently passed away. Antonio Subirats. He delved into this topic and provides some really compelling evidence that Stephen Hawking was essentially a giant spectacle. That everything that he talked about and all of the representations of him in media, that it was probably a variety of different persons that were wheeled out over time. I mean, I think that we see a possibility with that with a number of figures, including the current president, that this is part of the occult thespian really purview, that there are basically hidden in plain sight individuals that fill in roles where they're needed by the intelligence infrastructure in the intelligence apparatus. And Stephen Hawking and his pop culture imprint was absolutely part of this occult thespian program. And very convenient that he couldn't ever do anything, literally anything. Those two people right there, if
they look different.
They look different. They're different people.
This hand right here looks like a prosthetic.
Looks prosthetic, and then also the teeth
are different.
The teeth, the different protrusion angles, and everything. That's a different iteration of this puppet than that particular personage. And the amount of sophisticated developments technologically with masks, prosthetics, manipulating people's appearance, we're extremely good at that.
Right. Oh yeah.
We're extremely. That's one of our top techniques, is making people look different than they actually are. So I don't think that there's a hard limit that you can place on the extent to which that kind of manipulation of perception has been utilized. And I mean, and then you look at all of this imagery. It's a type of apocalypticism. Stephen Hawking was the guy that forwarded this whole idea of black holes, and that there's two massive black holes on either side of the universe, and after a gazillion years they're finally going to come together and swallow everything into a mega singularity, and we're all going to be kaput, and then from there a new big bang will happen. I mean, it's a religion.
None of it makes sense.
It's completely nonsensical, made up crap.
I'm just the idea of orbit makes no sense.
Crap.
Because
what's the mechanical explanation?
Mass.
There's no mechanical explanation for
force
gravity.
Of gravity. Why don't we pull the moon into the Earth? Why hasn't that happened?
Oh, because gravity is the god of the gaps within science. It's anything that is completely inexplicable.
How come when
it's gravity?
How come when
gravity?
How come when meteors are flying through space, they don't just get caught in that orbital, like that whatever ring it is, or sphere, imaginary sphere again, around the Earth, where I guess you just get fixed in orbit. Oh well, it has velocity going in. It can just go past that. Like it.
The explanation
and then it's
from the Hawking point of view is that all of this stuff in orbit and motion and everything is happening since the Big Bang. So everything that's happening is a result of the after effect, the ongoing ripple effect of the universe expanding from its origin into, well, what exactly? Dark energy, dark matter. That's what it's expanding into. I mean, it's completely made up. Make it up as you go. Fine tuning. Hypothecation.
I've had family members
it's all
say,
it is.
Gravity's real. It's a force we can measure. And I just do I tell them now that
it's not a force?
We haven't measured it?
It's not a force.
How have we measured it? A scale
where we measure the rate of acceleration through the
medium
that is less dense than the object that's accelerating down the path of least resistance. And we think that, because we can measure the acceleration rate, there must be a universal force. Notice the propensity within pseudoscience to automatically go to universal forces, universal attraction. Just the term universe, universality, the one verse, the one expression. It's a religion. Just because you don't emphasize God doesn't mean...
It's just a different term.
It doesn't mean that you're not making metaphysical appeals.
Absolutely not. The sphere.
Yeah. The sphere is a substitute God. You're saying it's a perfect shape. You're saying it's the basis for all things. You're saying that ultimately there's an indivisible sphere that composes everything. That's atomism. That's Democritus. That's Leucippus from hundreds of years before Christ. And in science, the sphere is basically Christ. Okay?
That's with that, hopefully y'all's mind was blown tonight. Unfortunately, our guest did not show.
He didn't show up.
and it's too bad. We were going to pay him for his time.
Yeah, we
know?
were going to pay him money.
And so I don't know.
Anyone who wants money,
yeah,
come on the show and actually collaborate with us. We've got a lot of material. And actually, I was listening to some of our early stuff, episode 1 through 10. It's still apropos today.
Good. So good. Yeah, me too. Thanks, Eric B, for dropping in and sharing your thoughts. I'm sorry we dropped you a couple times and didn't get to say goodbye. Y'all subscribe, like, check us out at ztitic.news, where we're always expanding the number of Ztitic content creators that we aggregate. Thank you guys for tuning in. We've got an average view duration of about 40 minutes, which I think is quite good. And actually, our number of concurrent viewers has grown throughout the show, and we're actually at the peak since the show started of folks listening. So,
excellent.
So thank you guys. Catch the replay on YouTube, Rumble, and Odyssey, and we'll catch you on the next show.
Until then,
farewell.
Farewell.